Hello and welcome to another Ionic tutorial video. In this video we're going to be looking at integrating Google Maps and geolocation into our Ionic application. To get started you'll need the developer preview version of your Ionic application running in your browser. If you don't know how to do this, please check out the second video in this series because it runs you through how to set up a development environment online as well as run the developer version of the application in your web browser. Once you've got that sorted, head over to your IDE and we're just going to install some third-party packages that we'll need in order to achieve this. So from the command line, just head over to the directory that your application is in and we're going to use Bower to install a few items. First of all, let's install Angular-Google-Maps. To do that, type in Bower install Angular-Google-Maps and save it as a development dependency with the flag save dev and hit enter. We'll also need ng Cordova, so Bower install ng Cordova with a capital C and again save it as a development dependency. And with those installed, just head over to the www folder and make sure that they're there in your library folder. As you can see, we have Angular Google Maps and a few dependencies as well as ng Cordova. Now we just need to configure it on the index.html page. In order to do this, just open index.html in the www directory and just above where your app.js is embedded into the file, create a new section and let's just call this external libraries as so. And then let's create a blank script tag like this. And inside here, the first one we're going to include is of course Angular Google Maps. That's located in lib-angular-google-maps. And then if we open that folder in our file tree, we'll see that we need to go into the distribution folder and then the minified version of the JavaScript file. So /dist/angular-google-maps.min.js. You can use the full version if you want, and if you need Street View, of course import those versions too. If we look down the list of installed dependencies now, we have Angular Simple Logger, which is also a dependency of Angular Google Maps. So above our embed for Angular Google Maps, let's install that. So the same process, lib-angular-simple-logger, and then inside that folder again we want to go to the distribution folder, and inside the distribution folder the file name we're looking for is angular-simple-logger.min.js. Be very careful not to do any typos here, otherwise it will throw you off course and it will be very difficult to debug in some instances. Going down the list again, we'll find Lodash, and this is again something that Angular Google Map relies on. So let's add that above Angular Google Maps just to make sure it can pick it up. So in the source, this time it's lib-lodash, and then the dependency is within the distribution folder, dist, and then lodash.min.js, and close the script tag. If we go down the list, we have ng Cordova, which we should also add, and we can add that to the top of the list as well because that's more of an umbrella source file that might be useful later on in a different video for a different plugin. And we're just going to add it as lib-ng Cordova, make sure it's case sensitive, /dist, and then ng-cordova.min.js and hit save. Now head over back to your application and reload it just to make sure we haven't made any typos, because if we have, they'll throw an error right now. and it looks like everything seems to be working okay. So there's one more plugin that we need to install, and to do that we're just going to use Cordova to install it, and we'll do that by typing in Cordova plugin add Cordova plugin geolocation, and just make sure we've spelt it correctly, and then hit enter. And that's the plugin installed to allow us to access the GPS module on the device that our application will be running on. And finally, there's one more dependency, and that's the Google Maps API. You can find that by going to angular-ui.github.io and heading over to the Angular Google Maps page. And if you scroll down, there'll be a link here to the Google Maps API. You just want to copy that and paste it into your libraries as well. So again, we'll just paste it after ng Cordova and hit save. Let's head back and reload our application and see if it throws any errors due to any typos we've made. So far so good. Now we just need to add those modules as a dependency to our application. And to do that, we just want to go to the app.js file located within www/js. And up here where we declare the dependencies, we just want to add ng Cordova as so, and also we'll want to add the Google Maps plugin, which is defined as UI gmap google maps, and hit save. And again, let's try and reload our application, and since no errors were thrown, it means we're good to go. Now we're going to start by adding a new tab and a new state to display the Google Map, and in order to do that, we're just going to head over into the app.js and create a new state, as I did in one of my previous videos. And as you can see, I've defined a locations state, as I have in one of my previous videos showing you how to do so. And now we're also going to need to add a controller and a view to match that. So that's the controller defined, and again I've shown this in a previous video, so I won't explain why and how I'm doing so. And also now need to create a view. And just double check to make sure that the controller and the name of the template or the view matches with what you've put in this state. And finally, let's just add it to the tabs menu at the bottom. And that's the tab added, so we should be able to reload our application and see the tab visible. So you can see this is the new tab I've created, and there's not really anything of interest in there at the moment. So we're just going to go ahead and add the Google Map. To do this, just go into the HTML file for that particular view and identify where you want to add the Google Map canvas. Let's just create a div which is going to contain the canvas, so we'll just call it map canvas. This isn't totally necessary, but it's good practice. Then we're going to use the Google Map directive to display the map, and that directive is called UI-gmap-google-map, and it's going to take some properties. So it's going to want a center, it's going to want a value for zoom, and it's also going to take some options as so. And then if we head over into our controller, we should temporarily be able to give it some static values for center, zoom, and options. So in here, let's just create a variable on the scope. Let's call that variable map. So scope.map equals an object. Inside that object, we're going to have values for the center. We're also going to have a value for the zoom, and let's just put that at 14 for now. Inside center, we need to set some values for the latitude and the longitude. So I'm just going to make some up right now. So latitude, let's say 51.629415. Just totally made up, but I know they're valid coordinates. And the longitude, again, we can just make up a value for now. 4.404418 should do, and hit save. Go back to the HTML and let's just put in those values here. So map.center and map.zoom should configure those values. Don't really have any options to be displaying, so we can hit Control Save. And finally, to actually make the map appear, we need to add one line of CSS to give the map a specified height. So if you just go into the www/css directory and open the default style.css style sheet and add the following CSS selector, which is angular-google-map-container, and give it a height of however large you want your map to be. 300 pixels is a good standard. Hit save on that and then reload your application. You should now be able to go into that new tab you've created and see the map. You can zoom in and out and scroll around, and of course it's showing some random position because we put some random coordinates in. In this next part of the video, we're going to look to add geolocation features to our Google map. Now, because of the way that Angular works, we'll need to know the user's locations before this locations page and controller are loaded. So as a developer, you have two choices. You can either find the user's location as a sort of background task or find it when the app launches. But for the purposes of simplicity for this tutorial, we'll be finding the user's location using a state resolve because we already have Angular UI router installed. Now, in order to do this, you just need to head over into your IDE and then open the app.js file. Now scroll to find the state on which you have declared the Google map, and as you can see, mine is located here as tab.locations. We're simply going to add a state resolve to this. So inside this particular view, based on the Ionic structure, we're going to add a resolve here as so, and then the value that we're going to find using our resolve, we're going to call user location info, and this is basically resolved by a function that will return a value that will be saved as user location info. For now, let's just hit Control Save in this and let's head over to our controller. Now in our locations controller, which is being used by that resolve, we just want to inject that value called user location info and hit save. Now back to that resolve function, we need to give our function some sort of logic that will get the value of the user and return it to this value called user location info. In order to do this, we need to inject something that we installed earlier on in this video, which is the Cordova Geolocation plugin as so. And then inside, we're just going to give some static options for this call. And what we'll do is we'll set a timeout to something fairly large for debugging purposes. So let's say 10,000 milliseconds. And we can also enable high accuracy and set that value to true. So this is just an object that we're going to pass to a function we're going to call. Of course, don't forget the equal sign here. So the function we're going to call is actually a part of the Cordova geolocation injection that we've just put in. So Cordova geolocation dot get current position, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It gets the current position. If we look at the ng Cordova documentations for the Cordova geolocation, you'll see that there's a function here called get current position, and it takes a bunch of options that we've set as timeout and enable high accuracy, and it will return an object. So in our code, we just want to pass that options variable as so, and this will actually return a promise. So we need to process that promise and resolve it. So of course we're going to have a dot then. If you don't know how to work with promises, read up on how Angular uses promises and that'll tell you everything you know. So that promise is going to give us a response, and we're going to need to do something with that response. Now inside this function, we're going to create a variable called location information, and this is going to store the values that are returned from the get current position method. Inside this object, we're going to have several smaller variables and objects. So one of them is going to be center, and let's just create that as a blank object for now. And we're also going to have a value for zoom, and I'm going to put in something crazy like 6 so I don't give away my actual location details. Now for the center object, we're going to have latitude and longitude values, and those are easy to do. So latitude is basically going to be a value from the response that we get from the get current position call. So we want to access the response object that's returned. We want to access coordinates, and then we're going to take the latitude value, and then we're going to have longitude, and again that's very similar to the line above, and have longitude there. Now the zoom value, just for your information, as stated in the documentation for this, must be a number between 1 and 20, where 20 is zoomed right in and 1 is zoomed right out from almost a global perspective. Now once we've found these values and created this object, we want to return this object that we've created, and it's called location info as so, and that will return it. But because we're processing a promise here, we also need to put a return statement here. So essentially, from a high level perspective, what's happening is this resolve is going to process a variable called user location info. This user location info is resolved by this function here, and this function basically makes a call using this plugin that we've injected to get the current position. When it gets that value, it has to process the promise, and when that promise is processed, it creates this variable here, which is then returned, and because it's a nested return, this returns to this, and so the value gets returned back to user location info. Now the reason that we're using a resolve here is because the controller and HTML will not load until any resolved variables here have been processed. Once those have been processed, they'll be injected into our controller right here, and we can use them as we please. So the next step here obviously is to replace our static values that we created with the values that we're going to be returning, which is user location info. Now if you reload your application on Chrome, you'll get a message asking if you want to share your location. Make sure you click allow, otherwise you will not get your location values. It should load up your location on a map like so. You'll probably need to load this over HTTPS, otherwise you'll get an error. This is because of the way that the Google Maps API and the geolocation feature works since 2014. So make sure you add HTTPS to the URL at the top here, or it might not work. Now as you zoom in, because the map is centered, you can see that it's zooming straight into London, which I can tell you is accurate, and I won't go any further than that, but it has retrieved my location perfectly. So there you go, that's how you can add a simple Google map to your Ionic application with geolocation information. In a later video, I'll show you how you can add markers and tags to this map just to make it a little bit more interactive and show more information, because at the moment, as you can see, it's showing the correct location, but it's not showing you exactly where.